Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kathy Hester, and welcome to my kitchen. We're going to do the simplest thing ever with tofu. You could do this with tempeh, you can do this with seitan. It doesn't matter. There is no good, bad, or indifferent. I'm trying to find my good knife. This one will work. Okay. And first off, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut around this with my kitchen shears, which are shears that you can lick because they're clean all the time. Okay, and I'm going to drain this little bit of water. This is organic, super firm tofu. You can use something else. Oop, the scissors over here. Actually, I can just drain it in here. You can use something else like a firm tofu, but you're going to have to press it. The reason I like this so very, very much is that it takes a lot of effort out of my life. And it also takes a lot of prep out of your dinner. It does cost a little more, and sometimes it's labeled as high protein. It's just because with the water pressed out, there's more soy there. So it's not got anything weird added to it. And you can rinse it or not. Okay, so we've got that out of our way. And then I'm just going to cut it into some pieces. This, so I can show you guys. And how you want to cut it is your own business. I'm going to cut it into 6 pieces. So I'm going to cut it about in half, down the middle, and then into about 3 pieces. Get it as even as you can, but don't stress yourself out over it. Sometimes it's hard to see, like with this side, and this side might be easier to see. So we just want some slabs of tofu. That's all we're looking to do. So that was easy enough. Okay. So the next steps, and I will give you a recipe for this. This is poultry seasoning. So it has no poultry in it, but what it does have is like rosemary and sage and just yummy Thanksgiving kind of spices. Actually, I've got to break this open. One of the things, if you grind spices like I do, if you have something from a vitamin, those little do not eat, they keep things drier. I live in a very humid climate, so sometimes things like that will stick together. But basically, it smells like stuffing. So we're going to take 2 dishes. And we can go ahead and get a smaller sheet pan is what I'm going for. And if you have one of these guys, you can always use that too. So this is like a little silicone baking sheet. Sometimes I like the performance of parchment better. And then the silicones are not as easy to clean up. Okay. So let's get our aquafaba going. So I'm just going to take a can of garbanzo beans and open it and strain out some of that into, got 2 little Pyrex pans. They don't need to be Pyrex because we're just dipping. We're not going to cook in them. So they could be plastic for all I care. That get it? Yes. Okay. And this is a little handy dandy guy that lets you just pour off stuff, which is kind of great. You could spray oil on the tofu too, but aquafaba works great. And it'll, just like we were talking about earlier with the green beans, it would work just fine. So what I'm going to do is, after the class, I'm going to store these in the fridge, and Cheryl can use them on her salads. So we're not wasting those either. Okay, the potatoes are starting to boil, so I'm going to turn them down a little bit. And then in this other one, trying to decide, I've got some gluten-free panko, but I think just some rice crumbs. You could use any kind of breadcrumbs. These are Trader Joe's gluten-free rice crumbs. You can also air fry chickpeas to make them crunchy and whirl them up and use that. And I think I saw where you could buy something like that and it was very expensive. So I'd encourage you to make your own. So I'm probably gonna put quarter cup-ish, third a cup. We'll see, somewhere between a third a cup and a half a cup by the time we get done. So let me move this up here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put some poultry spice. I'm probably putting about 2 tablespoons because I want that to be part of the flavor of this. I am not marinating it. I am not putting the flavor on the inside. I am putting the flavor on the outside. And I'm going to smell this. Yeah, that smells pretty good. I think, let's go ahead and make it a tablespoon. And this is going to make it nice and crunchy too. And let's put a little bit of pepper in there. Cheryl's not gonna like, that's too big a pepper for Cheryl. She's gonna go, ooh, it's spicy. We'll put a little, I'm actually gonna put a little bit of salt in the aquafaba because this is big flaky salt. If you are not using salt and you don't have a salt substitute you feel is plain, you could do a mixture of granulated garlic or powdered garlic and onion powder, garlic powder, and then some ground celery seed. I'm going to put about 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast in with that mix too. I have some big flake nutritional yeast, so I'm just kind of grinding that in a little bit with the back of my spoon. I don't know why I'm enjoying this so terribly much, but it's very satisfying. I encourage you to do that. Then I'm going to go ahead and just get some of the salt in there. Just kind of get it dissolved and moved around a little bit. Okay. So, and you know what? I just don't want to deal with the silicone baking liner. I am backing out of that and going back to some parchment paper. I will wholeheartedly encourage you to do, this is one thing that I splurge on is pre-done sheets. And I can even just fold it in half, or I could use my kitchen shears and cut. Or a combination. And I do this a lot, so I try to make it last as long as it can. So here's what we're going to do. And it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to get this really nice and wet in here. And sometimes, honestly, water will make things stick. And then we're going to get around in here. I'm going to use my dry hand. And with my dry hand, I'm going to kind of move this around the sides. And I may still need to pack some on, and that's okay. I'm going to see if I can get the dry side. Flip that over. Okay. And we're gonna make some gravy too. So like if it doesn't feel like it's on enough, then at that point you can come and press some on. Make sure they're on the sides. And then just sit over here. Take the wet hand, put it in the aquafaba. Let some of it drip off. Dry hand. And if you have some left over, you could use it for something else like cauliflower. Maybe you didn't use all your, ooh, I just took some of that off. That was a very bad move of mine. Shake it a little bit. Put it over on the side. I don't know if you guys can hear. Need to move this so you can kind of see everything happening a little bit more. Okay, wet hand. And if some of the tofu is thicker than the other, just make sure it's on the outside. I always have some that's thicker. That would be this one. But remember, the tofu is basically cooked. We're warming it up, and we're going to crisp the outsides. That's why we are putting it on the sheet pan, and we may not put all this on the sheet pan. And even if I was making it just for 2, you could do half the amount of tofu. But here's the trick. Once you have this, now you have the day after Thanksgiving dinner. You can do something too. See how nicely coated that is? And it's going to go down at the bottom because it's a big one. Wet hand. I'll shake this. If you shake it, then it just makes everything kind of get a little more even. Nestle it down in there. And you could put this on the same sheet pan or a different sheet pan. It's up to you and how big your oven is and how things are set up. If using panko, would you crush it up smaller or combine it with dry breadcrumbs? You know, here's the thing. It kind of depends on what you want. Like, panko gives you a crunch like nothing else will, although these rice crumbs are really nice. I will say that too. You could crush it up, though that kind of defeats the purpose of buying expensive panko crumbs. And honestly, that's why I decided to use regular instead of it. But you could mix it up, because what will happen, and I do use panko only on some things, and you're just not going to get the same kind of evenness. So like here, everything's even and filled in. You'll get some spots with panko and some spots that don't have panko. So, however, you could fix that by mixing the two together. You could even do something like do this. It usually works better if you have not just aquafaba but a slurry, so like a batter. So if we did this, then we did a batter, and then we did the panko. But then that's adding a lot of extra steps. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed. So, but you can totally crunch up your panko. I just somehow feel bad when I do it. There's no culinary reason not to do it. It's just one of those things. I'm like, I paid money for that to be all big and crunchy, and now look at me. So it doesn't fit in with my personality, I guess is the real reason. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of these slabs of tofu, and I'm going to put it in here. Let me move this a little. It's a little close to the wall for my liking. This is the air fryer basket for the Breville Air. And I'm just going to go ahead and put the 2 biggest pieces. This will save me later. I could go ahead and half do these and freeze them too. The coating tastes great. Just want to leave some space for when my veggies come out. So I'm going to air fry it on highest setting for about 8 to 10 minutes. So we're going to make some gravy. We're just going to make a small amount of gravy. The first thing we're going to do is take some oat flour. We'll probably take 2 to 3 tablespoons. We're going to put it in our pan and we're going to toast it. So we're going to make kind of a roux. And so we're going to do that at about a simmer. And you're going to want to have a whisk at the ready anyhow. and we're just toasting it. So here's the deal. Some people freak out about the idea of a raw taste of flour in their gravy. Other people, they don't care. So how much you cook this, you don't need to cook this like you're making a gumbo because we're not really wanting it to thicken up that much, but we are wanting to use this as a thickener. So I do make oil-free gravy all the time anyhow. So for me to go and then add some oil and butter in this is kind of a pain. Whereas toss some green beans in a little oil or make a pie crust, I'm fine with that. So that's my limitations. If you want a richer gravy, you can melt some butter, vegan butter obviously, and then toast, then add it to the flour. That is very loud. So if you're unsure from the color, because oat flour can be a little hard to tell, you can smell it. So right now, it doesn't smell nutty yet, but it doesn't smell like raw flour. And if you're not sure what's going on, then this is what I would encourage you to do. This smells like oats. Just oats. This smells like another thing. It doesn't smell like the same thing. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and whisk some almond milk. You could use any kind. I'm probably putting in about a 1/4 cup. I'm just going to try and let it get a little unlumpy. And honestly, I personally don't care if it's a little bit lumpy, especially if you're using oat flour. It's not going to be as smooth as if you're using wheat flour, because unless you've ground it in a spice grinder, which you are welcome to do. Okay, so you can kind of see this. I've made it into like a little paste. And so this is not the gravy magic. This is the thickening part magic. And then we can easily add in more. And we're not, more almond milk and make it thinner. I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. And I'm going to put, oh, that's wet. Let me get a different measurement. I'm going to put about a 1/2 teaspoon of poultry seasoning. This is my normal poultry golden gravy, you could call it. And then we're just going to mix those in there too. We're doing this on fairly low heat. If you find that you've added too much liquid and it's just not turning into gravy fast enough for you, you can turn the heat up. Even to like we're almost a boil, to where it starts to bubble a little bit. After that, it's just going to start splattering and it's not going to be very nice. And the beauty of the gravy is if we're not ready for it yet and it starts to get a little bit too thick, trying to get those oats out of there. There's some on. There we go. All you have to do is add a little more milk. I would not suggest using a sweet milk. Always use an unsweetened plain, but it could be almond, it could be hemp, it could be anything, soy. I use whatever is in my fridge. And also, I would go ahead again, if you're going to do a neutral salt substitute, you're going to want some salt in here. I'm probably putting about a 1/4 teaspoon. And I'm a fan usually of pepper gravy, but with this one, I want this to taste more like poultry seasoning. I want it to give the illusion of a chicken gravy. And we could even try, I have not tried and put turmeric in there. I'm usually good with this color. Because this does, you can see this really didn't take that long. And this is pretty close. It's up to you how thick or thin you want your gravy to be. And this was all done on quite a lower heat than I do on the stove. Now this is an induction burner, my arch nemesis in the kitchen, because it never does things like I'm used to on my stove. But this is working just fine. So let's taste it and see what we need to add. Oh, it's good. So you can see here too, I'm going to turn it down a little bit more. On here in particular, because it's oat flour we used, it will oat will thicken up a lot more than some other flours. It kind of becomes oatmeal-ish. That's why we keep whisking. If you turn your back and your gravy gets really, really lumpy, you can just put it in the blender. And I won't tell a soul. I'm going to put a little bit more in there. And I'm putting a little bit more liquid because that was about where I wanted it to serve. So we've got everything going in the background. And I want to make sure this doesn't get too thick or overdone before I'm ready for it. I'm going to check the tofu. It's got like 2 seconds. Let's see if I want to flip it over or not with some tongs. I hope you guys feel like you're here with me making Thanksgiving dinner, because I'm turning around enough that it is like that. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to let it go a few more minutes. Actually, I don't really want it to go 8 minutes. I'm going to put it in for 4 minutes. If I do something in the Breville for 8 minutes, I would probably do it in the egg-shaped ones, one of the smaller ones, in about 5 minutes. So usually the Breville takes just a wee bit longer. And that's okay, we love it anyhow. Okay. I'm going to turn this off for now and let it just kind of stay warm. So I'm going to take some mashed potatoes from over here, and I'm building my lunch plate. Okay. I'm going to build a small plate so that Cheryl and I can eat this all again tonight. So I'm just going to put some mashed potatoes, and I like to make a big well for my gravy. And you know I'm going to scrape that off with some kind of spatula, because I'm not wasting any of it. Then, let's get one of these pieces of tofu out, because it's going to get gravied up too. I'll put that in the golden side. Okay, let's see if we should do this. Okay, so we've got that. I am going to take some green beans. That'd be pretty right there. Just take a few pieces of delicata. Okay, a few Brussels sprouts. And you got to remember, I made this really for 2 people so that you can have, this would work for a family of 3, probably 2. To have little bites of everything. Get a couple more Brussels sprouts. And I'll move some of this delicata over here so it's prettier. And then I'm going to use a spoon to get some of these up, because I want to make sure I get some of that goodness from the bottom. Can you guys see me getting some of the maple syrup, which now is kind of a maple syrup reduction. A few nuts in there if you eat nuts. If you don't, you totally leave those out. Okay. And then I'm going to move this so I don't burn myself, and we'll do the gravy. And this is, you got to remember, what we're seeing right now that seems like oh so very, very, very much doesn't even count our appetizer or our dessert. So this is pretty much a feast, and an easy feast to do. Like, look at that. Isn't that pretty? I could have put a fresh, actually I could do that now. Let's just put a little fresh sprig of rosemary there. Because if, you know, just let it look photo ready. Okay. Can you tell I futz with food? And when when it's time for me to take pictures, right, I have to always do this. Clean the plate. Make things look like they just happened to perfectly land there, but they didn't. Okay. And then let's put some gravy on there. Because, and see, look, so I turned it off, and it's still quite thick. And I'm just going to take a ladle of gravy, put some in my mashed potatoes, and I'm going to put some on my tofu. And this plus soup plus pie equals a whole Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, well, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hopefully will see most of you next week. If you come up with some questions, you can email me at kathyhester@gmail.com. Okay, and I would love to see pictures of the food you guys make. So if you're not already in Vegan Recipes Cooking with Kathy Hester Facebook group, go ahead and join, and I would love to see you post pictures because it's going to be fabulous. And I will talk to you very, very soon.